that one. Let me get that off my screen. Okay. Very good. All right. Welcome everyone to the Robert Lunz Group Sierra Club May membership meeting. I'm Christine Von Kalnitz. I'm the chair of the local group. And our local group has about 1,300 members in it in Berkeley, Charleston, Colleton, and Dorchester counties. And just want to remind you, our mission is to explore, enjoy, and protect the planet. Here's some of our leaders, and I saw some of our leaders on the call. I saw Pat and Star and Laura and Nina. And we are looking for some new leaders with our treasurer position and political chair. So if you want to be a leader, just let me know. Let any of us know. Send us an email or give us a call. Thanks. All right, we're going to talk about outings for a second. So Star, do you want to pop in here and tell us what's going on?
So there's a time in the spring when I usually have other things to do, and that's in April, and I don't plan so many things. And I thought it would be nice. Actually, someone suggested this at the state chapter level, that maybe we should go down to some of the Black national histories of South Carolina. They're the Reconstruction era historic unit has been established in Beaufort, and then maybe we would do something else, maybe go Valley to the Penn Center and try and do something else. We will probably on this trip, which will be Saturday, June 18th, we will probably at least stop along the Combahee River in the vicinity of where Harriet Tubman's raid occurred in 1863. So we'll have a nice history outing, and it will be no doubt hot, and we will, if we have time at the end, go out to Hunting Island State Park, which is one of the state's premier coastal parks. It's incredibly beautiful, and lots of lessons to observe from there, along with getting a pretty good dose of the Reconstruction era Natural History Park and the Penn Center in Beaufort. So, well, counting the Combahee River thing, a trifecta of things, and there will be other stuff, mostly on the water for the summertime, and stay tuned. We'll be going many places in beautiful water, just like the little PD picture that you see right there.
This outing just looks incredible, Star. I just can't say how much I just want to go on this outing. We do have over here on the right-hand side of the screen, we've got information about how to sign up for our outings and for our newsletter, and the state chapter also has outings on their site. I will put those links in the chat once we get going on the meeting, and yeah, join us. All right, May is Mobility Month, and it's Eat and Drink Local Month. We have a lot of opportunities this month to get out there and practice what we preach. We've got Charleston Moves is having an entire month of events. They have Safe Streets and Clean Creeks coming up this weekend. That's pretty hard to say pretty quickly. I haven't tried to say that out loud yet. But yeah, so that's coming up this weekend. And then May 15th, they've got a bridge adventure ride and the Ride of Silence on May 18th, and then Light Up Your Commute May 20th. If you're in need of bike lights, they are going to be giving away free bike lights at that event. And then in downtown Charleston, or actually in the city of Charleston, they're going to start downtown, but Lime Bicycle has been awarded the contract for the city of Charleston's bike share program. They will be putting out the bikes starting tomorrow. There will be a kickoff event at MUSC near the Urban Farm tomorrow between 11 and 3. So if you can get down there for that, that'd be great. Otherwise, I will put a link in the chat to where you can go and sign up for the app on your phone, and then you can ride the bikes. There is a charge for riding those bikes. These bikes are new, they're all brand new, and they're electric. So every bike will be electric. So expect that you will be able to go about 20 miles per hour, except in the Market District area. They're going to limit the speed there to about 8 miles an hour. All right. Who doesn't like to eat and look at this food? It just looks great. So Low Country Local First is hosting Eat, Drink, Local Month. So that is, they've got events throughout the month. They've got a social event. They've got mentoring with SCORE Charleston. That is for anyone who wants to have a business related to food. And then on the 14th, they have their annual Chef's Potluck Dinner. And then they have their Local Works open house in May. And I will put on the right-hand side here, it says how to buy local. That is a website with just gobs of information on it. And I worked on this website for MUSC, and we worked with Low Country Local First. So I will put the link for that also in the chat. If you want to eat local, you can do it, and you will figure out how to do it with this website. It's got everything you need. All right, so next month, we will be hosting a film screening. So this film is 2040. And Star or Laura, could you come on to sort of tee that up and give people a little bit more about what they're going to be talking about?
So it's an inspirational film. This gentleman is in Australia, I believe, and he has a daughter, and he kind of wanted to think about ways that he could make the world better for his child and everyone else. And so what would it be like in her young adulthood? And so he put together, what are the things we can begin to do right now? This is a beautiful and uplifting film.
Okay, thank you. All right, so tonight we have a guest speaker, BlairBeasley, and she will talk to us about how Georgia's, they've got a group called DrawdownGA. And this is, they've got a roadmap for bringing climate solutions to Georgia. And she's going to tell us what they've been doing. It's a state level climate action program. And we're looking forward to hearing about that. If you have questions that come up during the speaker program, put them in the chat and we will answer them at the end of the program. Also, just to let you know, if you turn your cameras off, you can save energy during the program. All right, I am going to stop sharing my screen. So welcome, Blair.
Thank you. Let's see if I can pull my screen up. Okay, can you guys see that? Christine, is that showing up?
It is.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all for having me today. It is really wonderful to be with you all virtually. I am speaking to you from my home in Atlanta, and I'm excited to share about some collaborative climate solutions work going on just across the state line from you in Georgia that I hope will spark some ideas for those of you that are working on growing climate solutions and growing a climate community in South Carolina. When I talk to people about Drawdown Georgia, as I'm going to do today, I often start with a slide that's a reminder of what the science tells us about the impact of rising greenhouse gas levels and what a changing climate means for the communities that we all care about. I decided to remove that slide from my deck today, as I imagined everyone in this group was already keenly aware of the challenges we face. But then just this morning, as I was preparing for this conversation, I read that CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere had actually just reached 420 parts per million in April, which is a level not seen in at least the last 4.5 million years. Some of you all may have read that report as well. So I just wanted to acknowledge that it's really easy to feel overwhelmed as we embark on a conversation about climate. We face these huge systemic challenges. But this talk is about efforts to do something in the face of those challenges, which is to scale solutions that are ready to go today and make a difference for the places and communities where we live. And so I'm going to share about an initiative called Drawdown Georgia. Drawdown Georgia is an initiative the Ray C. Anderson Foundation is helping to lead to identify and grow promising climate solutions in Georgia in ways that advance other societal priorities, including equity, public health, economic development, and the larger environment. I don't know if I formally introduced myself as I just jumped right in, but I am the Director of Climate Strategies for the Ray C. Anderson Foundation. And for those of you who aren't familiar with us, we are a family foundation here in Georgia set up to honor the legacy of Ray Anderson. Ray founded a successful global carpet tile company called Interface, and he championed this notion of business doing well by doing good, and really turned his focus to environmental stewardship and sustainability. The foundation now works in a myriad of ways to carry on those values. I never had the honor of personally meeting Ray Anderson, but from the stories I've been told, he was fond of saying that we should all work to brighten the corner where we are. And it's in that spirit that we've been the primary funder of Drawdown Georgia to date. It's been about a year and a half, 2 years since a team of researchers publicly released the research that underpins this effort. And since then, Drawdown Georgia has grown from this exciting research project into a dynamic and multifaceted initiative. So here's what I am going to share with you today. First, I'm going to provide just a little backstory on how Drawdown Georgia came to be. And as you'll see, it's a project focused on climate solutions in Georgia that's rooted in research. So I'm going to walk through just the highlights of the research and share what we found. And then I'm going to focus on how we at the foundation, as well as many other partners across Georgia and beyond, are using this research to inspire and inform the growth of climate solutions. My hope is that you will see this work almost as a case study, and that there'll be themes or projects or tools that we've created in Georgia that can be of service to your work and even perhaps replicated in South Carolina. So the story of Drawdown Georgia is really rooted in the work of Project Drawdown. Project Drawdown was first a New York Times best-selling book and is now a really wonderful nonprofit organization. The book has this catchy subtitle of "The Most Comprehensive Plan Ever Proposed to Reverse Global Warming." And it highlighted about 100 climate solutions that could be deployed globally to reach this state that they coined as drawdown, which is when greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere stop rising and actually start to decline. It's an inspiring list of solutions that includes traditional engineering solutions like solar power and electric vehicles, as well as social solutions like educating more women and girls. So many people, including myself, have been really inspired by this solutions first framing to climate mitigation. But there's one thing that a reader of this book cannot do. So it takes this truly global perspective, and therefore it doesn't provide a roadmap for what any particular state or region or locality should do to reduce its emissions. So in this way, I like to think of it as an inspiration, but not necessarily a roadmap for local change. So that's where Drawdown Georgia enters the picture. This project provides that translation from a set of global solutions to a climate solutions roadmap for Georgia. I had the privilege of serving on the Drawdown Georgia research team through some work I did at Emory University. And now I'm working with the team at the Ray C. Anderson Foundation, supporting the next phase of work, which is bringing this research to life. But the project of Drawdown Georgia is really much, much bigger than any one foundation, which I hope you will come to see. So in 2019, this group of researchers from Georgia Tech, University of Georgia, Emory University, and Georgia State embarked on that research journey to answer the question, which of those 100 climate solutions identified by Project Drawdown was most applicable to Georgia? So how did we do that? Well, as I said, we took those 100 climate solutions as the jumping off point. And then we ran each of them through a series of filters. Is the solution relevant to the state? Will it be ready at scale by 2030? Is there sufficient local experience? Can the solution cut enough greenhouse gas emissions in Georgia? Is it cost competitive with other solutions in the sector? And then as a team, we also considered what we call beyond carbon impacts, looking at how solutions could impact things beyond carbon emissions, like public health, equity, the larger environment and economic development, particularly as these solutions scale. And in doing so, we winnowed down those 100 global solutions to 20 high impact solutions for Georgia. And this is our list. As you can see, they span 5 key sectors: electricity, buildings and material, food and agriculture, land sinks, and transportation. They contain some of the usual suspect solutions like building more solar, replacing gasoline-powered vehicles with electric vehicles, and investing in energy efficiency by retrofitting existing buildings. They also contain some solutions that may surprise you, things like reducing food waste or composting. And finally, you'll see that most of the solutions are focused on ways to decrease sources of greenhouse gas emissions. But we have 3 land sink solutions in that kind of purple color that are all about increasing opportunities for the natural sequestration of carbon dioxide through trees and vegetation and soil. So things that naturally pull carbon dioxide out of the air. The research team then modeled the impact of scaling these solutions to what we considered ambitious but achievable levels over the next decade. And we found that Georgia could actually reduce its emissions by 1/3 in 2030 and get the state on track to meeting our portion of the US's commitment under the Paris Agreement. So far, I have just talked about carbon, but a fundamental part of this analysis, as I mentioned, is what we call beyond carbon. And as the name implies, this is a focus on how climate solutions can impact those societal priorities beyond carbon emissions. Because this is such a key part both of how we thought of the research and how we're moving forward, I just wanted to take a quick minute to unpack it a little. So the research team worked with some community partners to begin to map each of those 20 solutions to the beyond carbon indicators. So for example, what are the air and water quality impacts of scaling a solution? Is the solution affordable and accessible? Would scaling the solutions create local jobs? And what are the demographics seeing job impacts in those sectors today? What are the anticipated property value impacts and in what neighborhoods? Are there public health impacts like impacts to premature mortality or morbidity? And does the solution impact quality of life? So you can find those indicators for each of the 20 solutions on our website, which is drawdownga.org. And we're also getting ready to release a new report that begins to unpack even more this intersection of climate and equity. So for the rest of my talk, I'm going to focus on what comes next. So since that research was released in October of 2020, we have really focused on how to bring this research to life to support the scaling of climate solutions in our state. So I like to think about a few different ways that we at the Anderson Foundation, as well as many others in the community, are going about this work to support thought leadership, to work with the business community and other partners across the state, and to focus on community engagement and education. It's really important to note here that Drawdown Georgia is actually not a 501c3, so it's not its own NGO or organization, but instead it's more of an open platform for organizations and individuals to use as we address the climate challenge collectively. We often say at the foundation that our goal is not to be the leader of Drawdown Georgia, but instead to support a leaderful movement. So one thing I wanted to start with is one of our examples of thought leadership, which is a really exciting and new tool, the Greenhouse Gas Emissions Tracker, which you can find on our website. I hope that some of these tools that I'm about to share with you and walk through and unpack a little bit spark some ideas for how they could either be useful to your ongoing work in South Carolina or how they could perhaps be replicated. And this is one of the key ones. So we just recently launched this tracker. It was developed by researchers at Georgia Tech and the University of Georgia. And the project was led by a researcher named Dr. Bill Drummond. So this is a free online tool that allows you to explore greenhouse gas emissions broken down by sector at the state and the county level. So people can see where emissions are coming from in the communities where they live or they work or they visit. So Georgia is heavily forested. About 60% of the state is actually forested. So in addition to sources of emissions, it also tracks how forests are serving as carbon sinks in the state. So the data comes from publicly available data sets, primarily from the federal government. But I don't know if any of you have ever tried to work with these federal data sets in their raw form. They can be really not user-friendly. They're pretty difficult to use. So Dr. Drummond and his colleagues have written computer code that allows us now to explore this information in a really accessible way. I'm going to give you just the quickest overview of how to use the homepage here, and then I hope you guys all will go and check it out on the website. So this is the view you get when you sign on to the tracker. And then up here in the upper left, you can toggle either what county you want to look at or the data year. So our most recent data is from December of 2021, which is what I've shown on this page, but you can actually dig back into the past as well. Then depending on what you've selected, here I have December 2021. I've set this little graph to annual emissions. So it's showing me the annual emissions going back to 2005 up to the current data year at the end of 2021. And you can see that Georgia's emissions are actually declining slightly over time. And that mainly has to do with our reduced usage of coal-fired power plants. Up here, you can see the total emissions per month in metric tons. So it's about 9.2 million metric tons. These are net emissions. So it's total emissions subtracting out the role of forests. And you can see for the year of 2021, we have a statewide net carbon footprint of about 103 million metric tons. They also provide two different sources to try to give you a sense of what does this mean at a more granular level. So it's about 840 metric tons for every 1,000 people, or about 1,800 pounds per person in Georgia. And then finally, as you look at the bar chart, you can start to see for the state in 2021, how our emissions spread out. So by far, our largest source of emissions are transportation emissions. This is actually the same as it is as the nation. It's the nation's #1 source of emissions is transportation. It's a little hard to tell here, but electricity is actually just behind it at #2, but those emissions are distributed among residential, industrial, and commercial emitters here. And then you can see the role of forestry sequestering about 41 million metric tons. And then down at the bottom, you can see there's actually 7 different frames that you can explore and learn more about emissions in the state. I'm going to quickly just share a few of those. So one of the frames allows you to see where all of the major industrial and commercial emitters are throughout the state of Georgia. One thing that turned out that I learned after we released this is there's actually a fertilizer plant outside of Augusta, Georgia, that is responsible for about 2% of total emissions statewide. It's actually the largest point source emitter of CO2 outside of power plants. We've also mapped where every power plant is in both Georgia and Alabama and the carbon footprint associated with those plants. It includes Alabama because it turns out Georgia actually gets 20% of our power imported from Alabama. So it's important to kind of recognize both where their emissions are as well as ours. And then finally, as I mentioned, for land sinks, Georgia has 60% of its land is actually forested. So this, you could dig into what your, the total state as well as county level carbon sinks are throughout Georgia. At a state level, it's about 41 million metric tons. I looked, and that's more emissions than the country of Switzerland emits each year. So it's significant. And when you zoom into like the very micro level at this county level, there are some counties in Georgia that actually have so few people and so many trees that at that level, they're actually carbon negative. So we're hoping that people who live in these communities can dig in, learn more about what's happening in their backyard. Decision makers can start to make some priorities of where they want to invest to reduce emissions in their communities as well. I wanted to share one more tool because I think it could be helpful to you all in South Carolina, and this is under the category of coming soon. So some of this layout is going to change before it goes live. But later this year, we're releasing a series of how-to toolkits. So these toolkits are being written by experts across Georgia, our NGO leaders, to answer questions that people have about climate solutions. To provide an on-ramp. You know, we get a lot of feedback of your framework's interesting and like, what can I do? How do I plug in? And this is our attempt to begin to answer that question. So we're going to roll out a series of these, but the first ones that are going to go live are how to adopt an electric vehicle, how to compost, how to make your home more energy efficient, how to put rooftop solar on your home, and how to join a demand response program. So we're really excited to start linking people to accurate and informative climate information written by experts in Georgia. But I truly think this is going to be information that would be helpful both to people in Georgia as well as people in South Carolina and across the country. It's not just going to be Georgia specific information. So once it's live, I'm happy to reach back out to your group so we can share. We're also working closely with the business community in Georgia, and we have an exciting new collaboration with them. A team at the Ray C. Anderson Center for Sustainable Business at Georgia Tech recently launched the Drawdown Georgia Business Compact. So this is an effort that's bringing together a group of companies that are either headquarters or have a large significant footprint in the state that are coming together to leverage their collective impact under a goal of achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2050. So in order to join, the companies have to support this transition to net zero and agree to participate in at least one collaborative initiative that advances the goal. They're coming together with the support of the business school to really create a community of practice. It's not the type of initiative where businesses are just signing on to a pledge and then walking away, but instead they're meeting regularly and exploring group projects that they can do together. I meant to check our total number of companies before I jumped on this call, but it's somewhere between 25 and 30 currently, and more are being recruited all the time. So it includes some names that you would recognize, like Amazon and Delta and Google, Norfolk Southern and Coca-Cola, as well as some smaller companies that you may not know yet, like the food waste recovery company Gooder or the compostable materials company Better Earth. Then I wanted to share 2 additional examples of how other partners are utilizing the drawdown research here to support efforts at colleges and universities, as well as in the faith community in Georgia. So first, Drawdown Georgia Higher Ed is an effort being run by an NGO called the Georgia Climate Project, which is a group of about 10 colleges and universities in the state that are working collaboratively around issues of climate change. And they launched this initiative to focus on the real leadership role that higher ed has to play, both in training the next generation of climate leaders, as well as thinking about the role of their own facilities. And they're doing this work all through the lens of those 20 high impact climate solutions. Another partner is the NGO Georgia Interfaith Power and Light that has built a program to bring Drawdown Georgia research to the communities of faith in Georgia through a program that they call Drawdown Georgia for Congregations. And so they're working across the state to implement Drawdown Georgia solutions like energy efficiency and rooftop solar at houses of worship, and to support people in the faith community to get involved in local and state and federal policies to support climate solutions. I'll note that as we work to try to get these groups together to kind of help us build out a community of practice around these solutions, we recognize that we have a role to play as funders as well. And so we are currently in the process of working with funders throughout Georgia to create a new grant opportunity to communities on the front line in Georgia who are interested in scaling climate solutions. And we hope that grant will go live for applications in the fall. And then last but not least, before we can turn to questions, we're doing a lot of work to support engagement and education. And I'll just give a few really quick examples. We've created our Drawdown Georgia Leadership Council to help guide Drawdown Georgia as it grows from research to movement. And that Leadership Council really represents people from across our state that bridge traditional dividing lines that have slowed progress historically, whether that be urban and rural, Black and white, Democrat and Republican. And so they're helping us to guide the program and serve as ambassadors for this work. We are also running a blog on our website that includes many voices from across Georgia, from members of that Leadership Council to leaders in the nonprofit space, higher ed, business, and beyond. And so this blog is helping us to showcase and spread the word about work going on in the climate solutions space in our state. We also have a webinar series called Climate Solutions That Go Beyond Carbon, where we bring experts from across Georgia together to dig into topics of interest. We've hosted webinars on topics like reducing food waste, growing solar, and the Georgia Power IRP process. And then finally, for anyone who's interested in staying connected to all this work, we put out a newsletter twice a month that has a news roundup about climate solutions in Georgia, and then updates from just across Drawdown Georgia world. And you can sign up for that that newsletter on our website, drawdownga.org. So I know that was a lot going on. So I'll end my remarks here, but I do sincerely hope that there were ideas from this Georgia context that resonate with you all that are working to understand what to do in South Carolina. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Blair. That was great information. And I am so impressed with everything you all are doing in Georgia. That's just,
thank you.
We want that for South Carolina. I think you've got a lot of jealous people here. So one of the first questions to come in was, can South Carolina set up a GHG tracker like this, and how do we do it?
So this tracker, like I said, was built by a researcher named Bill Drummond at Georgia Tech with the intentional plan that it could be replicated elsewhere. So it uses no proprietary data. It all comes from federal data sources. And he's actually working now on some research papers to publish the R code that underlies it. There are several ways that people could work to get this replicated for Georgia, but the primary way is to be connected to Bill Drummond. He is in conversations with a bunch of other states to figure out what makes the most sense. In order for it to be really useful, the data needs to be kept fresh. And so he has a team of graduate students that every month are updating our data set. And so he's thinking really creatively about how to support other communities who want to do this. So if there's like an interest, I'm happy to help make that connection.
Thank you. Yeah. All right, there were a good bit of questions. I know every time that I see someone talk about forest or sequestration, there's all sorts of questions, and that is true tonight. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, so can you talk more about the forest in Georgia and how that's playing into this?
Sure. So one thing to note is we have really worked to understand their impact in reducing carbon emissions and have not leaned into the idea that those should then become carbon offsets that then offset current emissions, but they play a real role. And so we have worked with some great researchers at University of Georgia who study the forests in Georgia to better understand the role they play and help us all to see kind of the value in this larger system. Like I said, we've taught, I think a lot of times the tension here is that there is a desire to not see those trees then offset's the wrong word here, then to take away the need to reduce emissions in real time. So the leap there hasn't been made, but this understanding of their role in our state, as well as the role of coastal marshes in our state, we have spent time exploring.
So how do you keep up with, say, forests that's going to be cut down versus forests that is sort of like under a land easement or something? Conservation.
Right. So 90% of Georgia's land is privately owned, and much of it is working forests. And so that cycle is built into their analysis of understanding what part of our land is actually working forest versus, land that is under easement, et cetera. So one thing I'll notice, this is why it's just been really helpful to really invest and work with local researchers and have a local experience. For instance, I know EPA has started to put out some statewide greenhouse gas emissions data, but they don't consider the fact that 20% of our electricity comes from Alabama. And so it's just really hard to start downscaling, and being able to have people who are working here and really understand what's happening in our communities has made it a lot easier. It's always difficult, but to capture a truer picture for Georgia.
So one of the questions that dug down into this too was, and I think we have this problem in South Carolina, is the companies that are pelletizing trees, for fuel.
Mm-hmm.
Is that also, is anyone working on that to try to stop that, because it's really not technically a greenhouse gas reducer?
So we look at the emissions associated with biofuels burned in Georgia. One thing that we do not capture, as far as I know, is this idea of the pellets that say we send to Europe and then the emissions that are emitted there. It's the same way we don't capture all of the emissions associated with the air travel flying out of Atlanta Hartsfield, but we do capture the things that happen at the airport facility itself. So it's not a full total. You could find emissions that are not captured here, but biofuels burned in Georgia are captured on that power plant site, as well as through our electricity sector analysis.
Yeah, it looked like it was capturing mostly scope 1 and scope 2.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
And, right. So were there any scope 3 in there?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'll say that one thing that's really exciting about this team that's built that tracker is that we're continuing to build it out. I don't think scope 3 is going to be the next way we do build it out, because that data can be really tricky. But I do think one of the next steps may be to capture some climate solutions as frames. So to be able to see here, like where all the chargers are, public electric vehicle chargers, or where's the rooftop solar in our state, or which of our landfills have landfill methane capture. So we may start to combine some of the emission sources with some of the solutions as part of the same mapping system, but that's kind of a phase 2.
Okay. And just for the audience, scope 1 emissions are emissions that you're responsible for. So if you bought fuel and burnt it. Scope 2 are emissions that the power company is responsible for, but you're buying the power from the company. And then scope 3 is anything else, sort of like if you bought a ream of paper or if you bought a couch or whatever, that you purchase, you're still responsible for those emissions, but it's so hard to count that.
It's very difficult. It's very difficult. And one of the things that's really helpful here is that it's all based on these really credible data sets. And currently we don't have that kind of data at the state level to be able to fully capture the scope 3 emissions, but I think it is something that we recognize, right?
Right. So, let's see. So, as far as the political realm and the government in Georgia, how is that going? Is that a problem, or are they backing you? What's going on with that?
So we have not done a lot of political activism through this from the foundation standpoint. However, one of the things that's really helpful about this not being a 501c3 is we are putting the education and the data and the tools out there. So groups that do political activism at our state level have access to really credible state level data and resources that they can use. And so I know of many groups who have begun incorporating this in that type of work, but that work has not flowed through the foundation. And it's one of the many reasons that we're interested in kind of democratizing all of this information, because we just know this is a big nut to crack and there's a lot of different players. Georgia, the big thing on everyone's mind is what's happening at the Public Service Commission right now. Our major utility, Georgia Power, is going before the Public Service Commission for their integrated resource plan, which is where they present their plan for how they're going to meet electricity demand over the next, they do it every 3 years, planning out for 20 years. So this is where they'll decide what coal plants will stay online, what coal plants will shut down, how much solar they'll build, what they'll do about energy burden customers, what kind of energy efficiency programs. So it's really the focus, I think, of a lot of the climate community right now. And for the first time ever, we have cities and municipalities who are joining together to intervene in that process, which has been exciting to see.
Yeah, I think it is interesting how, a lot more people know what an IRP is and care about it and just getting the word out. There are a lot of groups that are doing a really good job at explaining these things and getting common everyday citizens involved to understand where their power is coming from, and that these plans come up every so often, and that these plans matter for global climate change.
Yeah, so we actually had a webinar a few weeks ago where we had speakers talk about how Drawdown Georgia solutions, which ones are at play in the IRP, and what to expect, and what are kind of how much solar has Georgia Power agreed to in their proposal? How much is their kind of opening bid? What's happening with energy efficiency? What's happening with the other resources? So I think having this framework has been helpful in that sense as well, to help people understand why these different processes matter to the issues they care about.
Yeah, I think that visualization of I'm blanking on the word. Well, anyway, the visualization of the data is just incredible. That helps. That just makes it so accessible to everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let's see. Are the government data sets adequately funded was one of the questions.
So it's all coming from the federal data sets, and they're pretty good. I think one of the challenges is that they're often just at very different units and at very different scales. And so one of the things that Dr. Drummond and his team have done is to figure out a way to get everything at the same unit and the same scale, which is quite a feat. But in general, I think they're pretty good data sets.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
And then back to the energy. So do you know if there's political will to shut down coal-fired power plants in Georgia?
So Georgia Power has put together a proposal to shut down coal-fired power plants in Georgia by 2035, with many in the nearer term. I think they are facing some pushback from our Public Service Commission under this idea that perhaps our grid would be less reliable in Georgia. But that is currently subject to conversation at the IRP, but Georgia Power's opening proposal included massive shutdowns of their coal-fired power fleet. I will say the thing that is raised eyebrows is some of that generation is being replaced by the expansion at Vogtle nuclear power plant. Some of that reduction in coal is being replaced by solar, but a lot of it is being replaced by natural gas.
Right, right. Yeah, there's a company locally, Santee Cooper, that they're proposing to shut down coal and replace it with natural gas.
Right.
But then the other co-ops are trying to figure out how to add more renewables in that mix as well. So they're kind of tugging back and forth right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you did answer the next question, I think, about where is Georgia with nuclear energy. You have some, and you might have more.
We have some, and we have had a long running issue with Georgia Power's expansion, adding 2 units onto an existing plant in Vogtle, which was supposed to come online, I believe, in 2016, and is not online yet. They're hoping the plants will be online maybe next year, but they are massively over budget and delayed. And so, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big political issue here for sure.
Everyone in South Carolina understands.
Right. When your plant was pulled, ours continued despite, and there's been a lot of cost overruns and time delays associated with that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, we just got word this week
I
that
saw that.
the lawsuits are finally settled. So we're still going to be paying, but we're getting a little money back. So I guess one of my questions too is the business community in Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
The Anderson Foundation is behind this, and that as an outgrowth of industry. And you talked a little bit about other businesses, but can you talk more about, in general, how the businesses are getting behind you and what they're doing to get
Sure.
behind you?
So I think as we, all of us working in states that don't necessarily have a lot of top-down leadership in climate solutions, but we continue to work on state and local policy, we also are really interested in what other actors have significant footprints and ability to make a difference in this space. And the business community is certainly part of that conversation. And so this Drawdown Georgia Business Compact is an attempt to get a range of businesses, large and small, together with a Georgia focus to start working together on climate projects. I think the thing that's particularly exciting and interesting to me is that it's being housed out of the university. And so they're able to bring a lot of cool and creative resources to bear to try to have some meaningful programs. They have a lot of students who are very committed to climate, who are interested in supporting this work. They have a lot of professors who at the business school, where this is a huge focus, who are interested in supporting this work. And so, as I mentioned, it's not just like a sign-on pledge where it's like exciting to see a business say that they care about climate, but instead they are having regular meetings and they're working together to figure out what projects that they can do together to invest in climate solutions in our state.
Great, great. Well, I think I know some people at Clemson to talk to.
Originally when we created Drawdown Georgia, our hope was that there would soon be a Drawdown South Carolina or a Drawdown Florida or Drawdown North Carolina. And we've quickly come to see that while that's still a model that's certainly open to people, that it is kind of a big undertaking to kind of piece together who would be the funders, who would be the researchers, who has kind of the network and the community to bring this to life. And so while we still support states who have come to us to kind of explore that, We're also interested in this kind of a la carte model. Like, are there tools or programs that we've created that have resonance in our neighboring states, perhaps even without the full framework? And so we've heard from some states interested in whether their business school could host a similar compact and take some of the lessons learned from this Georgia experience, or create, work with Dr. Drummond to create a tracker for local greenhouse gas emissions, even without the full framework. So that's certainly a pathway.
There was a group of businesses that met last week, as a matter of fact, in South Carolina. And the reason they met is because South Carolina is not doing enough to help their businesses get to where they want to be on the environment. So yeah, there may be some pathways there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right. I'm not understanding this question that someone asked about the tracker map changing over time. Does it change over time? I think it does. I mean, you said that they update it.
Yeah, so it's going to be up. The data will be updated about monthly. We just launched it and we've updated the data once. So I think it's going to probably be about monthly. Some of the data only gets released every year. Like, I think at the, for instance, those industrial emitters, that data source only comes out every year. So there's some data sources that can't get updated monthly, but a lot of the data can. And so we'll push out new monthly data, hopefully every month, compare 2019 versus 2020. So we have all that data in there. It goes all the way up through 2021 now. And so you can look at how the data years compare. If you remember in that top left, as you can toggle the dates, if you keep it on December and change the years, those annuals emissions is the total emissions for each year. If you instead picked like August 2021, the annual data that would show up would be from January to August. So you have to keep the data, the month as December, if you want it to be the full year. And there's a really great webinar for people who wish that they could really geek out here. We have a great webinar on our website that's recorded where Dr. Drummond and Dr. Marilyn Brown from Georgia Tech, who did the electricity sector work, Dr. Mohan from UGA, who did our forestry work, they all talk about the data and kind of key themes that you can look for in it. So if you're interested in really learning more, I would recommend that.
And did the Anderson Foundation fund their work?
We did.
Okay.
We did.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So were there any state agencies that helped out? It looks like maybe the environmental department, did they help in any way?
So they did a bunch of focus groups. The researchers did a ton of focus groups as they were developing this, where they brought experts in from state agencies, from the NGO community, from just community activists together to make sure that they were displaying things in ways that made sense, that the data sources were the most relevant. And so, yes, I believe there were some state agency participants through that work, but they didn't participate in a funding way or in a more formal capacity, but as a reviewer, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, it would be great to do that here. And I think that there are some people on this webinar right now who are ready to go.
That's great.
Oh, there's one other question, and this is one of those odd duck sort of things that people don't think about. Have you described carbon as a pollutant when educating the public? Folks hate pollutants like mercury and etc., mercury and lead.
So we spend a lot of time in this education space. One of the things I thought was really interesting was Dr. Marilyn Brown and Dr. Corey Struthers, they're two professors at UGA and Georgia Tech. They did some polling recently around climate solutions and climate policy in Georgia. And one of the key takeaways was just how little people still know both about climate change and climate solutions, which I think is really eye-opening. I think sometimes people who are really in the weeds assume that people all kind of know everything about this space. And I think it's important that we continue to provide on-ramps for people with credible information. And so we do talk about carbon and the role of greenhouse gases under this framework of like, what does a changing climate mean for Georgia and what can we do about it? And so we talk a lot about climate impacts and the role of climate solutions to kind of start to mitigate some of those.
And then one other question, was methane included?
That's a really good question, and I don't want to answer it incorrectly. So all of the data from the original analysis was in CO2e. And so I believe there was some methane associated with that, primarily looking at landfills. We don't have any like gas production in the state. We do have gas burning facilities, but we don't have like fracking or anything here in Georgia. So I think there was some methane looked at, but it wasn't a major factor.
Okay. All right. We have no other questions. We got them all.
Great.
Yeah. This has just been fascinating. And yeah, like I said before, I think we're all ready to go and have this in South Carolina somehow. We want to figure out how to do it.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to share and to learn more about your group and all you guys are doing here in Charleston.
Thank you for coming, Blair. It was a pleasure to have you, and thank you for your presentation. And thank you everyone who's on the call tonight for coming. And we've got some kudos coming in. Absolutely. So yeah, we will. We have recorded this, and we will get it on our website. And please share it with other people, and let's get the word out. And let's see if we can get the contact information for your professors and get some professors in South Carolina interested in this and see what we can do.
Absolutely. Sounds great. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Blair. And thank you, everyone. Y'all have a great night.